Come and discover. Be curious. Infobase connects people, content, and learning experiences.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. My name is Greg Ritchie. I'm the product marketing manager for the K-12 arena of products that Infobase provides. I'm joined today by Jeff Soloway, who has graciously offered his time to meet with us and so we can get to know him a little better, so we can get to understand a little bit more about the man behind the products. And he'll get into the different products that he works on, Bloom's literary criticism, and Bloom's literature mainly. Jeff, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Greg. It's great to be here.
Jeff graduated from Harvard with an AV in English and American Literature and has worked on literature and language print and electronic products at Infobase since 2002. From 2005 to 19, he collaborated with the legendary professor Harold Bloom to edit the ongoing Bloom's Literary Criticism print and ebook series to develop the Bloom's Literature online database available only through Infobase. In 2015, he delivered the broad lecture at Florida International University on the subject of humanities publishing in the digital age. So all of those amazing accolades behind him, this is the man, the myth, the legend, Jeff Soloway. And we're just going to get to know Jeff a little better today. So Jeff, one of the questions, I know that you had a few to pick through. One of the ones that we chose was, what is Infobase Bloom's Literature and how does it help educators and learners?
Well, that's a great place to start, Greg. Bloom's Literature is a database for students of literature, and that's kind of that's a very important distinction. There are lots of other literature databases out there, and I think most of them are really designed more for academic researchers. They have a lot of comprehensive content of many fairly obscure literary journals, things like that. And Bloom's also has a lot of literary criticism, a lot of content from journals, but it's really focused on the needs of students and educators. So, we offer not only comprehensive coverage of great writers and their works, but we also offer a lot of student-friendly guidance on how to write and research different kinds of literature. We offer writing prompts and essay topics. We offer full text literature, like, you can read The Great Gatsby on Bloom's. And we also offer lots of multimedia, especially video. So you can watch classic productions of Arthur Miller and Shakespeare and great writers like that on Bloom's itself. So Bloom's covers every writer you can imagine, from the classics to today's much more diverse and popular voices, but we really try to focus on what's being taught in classes today.
That's great, and I know even comparing Bloom's to like a Cliff's Notes is an oversimplification. I know that Bloom's makes it really easy to dig into the different elements of writing and literature, and so I love it. I think it's a great product. Not only does it bring all that great content, but it brings that easy accessibility and discovery. So I hear a lot of our editors speak about connecting learners to exciting content. What does that mean to you?
Well, connecting learners to exciting content, that's important for every kind of academic or educational discipline, but I think it's really super important for literature, maybe more important than in any other discipline. Because teaching literature, the important thing isn't just to educate students, it's really to inspire them to go out and enjoy great works of literature. It's about, convincing them to love literature. So, doing this is really central to Bloom's. When I hire a scholar to write about a certain work, I always tell them, I want them to be critical of the work and to think deeply about the work, but I also want them to be really upfront about why this work is worth reading, why this is something great and worth grappling with for any student who takes the time and effort. As you know, for many years, we worked with Harold Bloom on this database, and he was controversial and he was old-fashioned in many ways, but one thing nobody ever doubted was his love for literature and his ability to inspire people to go out and read great literary works. So after you, after you read one of his essays, or after you saw him speak in a video or heard him speak in person, after that, you just wanted to run out and start reading some of these great writers he was talking about. You wanted to read Shakespeare, Emily Dickinson, or Zora Neale Hurston, or someone like that. And I think that's really an important spirit to keep hold of, and definitely tried to keep that alive in Bloom's literature. Just to speak about me personally, I love literature. I read all the time. And I love to see plays in New York. I love to read new books and classic books. But what I really love is that I get to express that passion on my job.
I think that's great. And I think that you have definitely continued that spirit of Harold Bloom and kind of helping people engage with that content. If you just look at the number of assets, the different kinds of ways that you can connect with literature that you brought into Bloom's, I think that you absolutely do that you kind of find that student interest where they're at and pull them into the actual literature itself. So classic books that I've never even thought of, I kind of went into Bloom's and I was like, that's really neat. I didn't know. So definitely serendipitous moments all throughout that database. So now the important question. Why should educators trust Infobase Bloom's literature?
Well, that is a good question. As you know, Greg, I've been at this job for a while. In fact, just about all the editors who work for Infobase on these databases have been there for a while. So I've been there for almost 20 years. And when I was first hired, the main division at Infobase was Facts on File, the reference book publisher. And I was hired to be a reference book publisher. So I published books like Critical Companion to Mark Twain and the Encyclopedia of American Writers, things like that. So being a reference book editor, that's how I was trained. And the idea is to, we were always told you have to get the facts right. That's the most important thing. So there's a whole process behind that. You have to hire, respected writers with the right credentials. You have to check their work. You have to edit very carefully, and you have to make sure that things are right. So, we're a different company now, obviously, as you know, but we still hold on to that same mindset, I think. That's still sort of our guiding light as we work.
That's fantastic. A lot of those things I didn't even realize that we did so many checks and balances kind of all the way through the process of bringing that content into our databases. So that's awesome. So kind of looping back to the idea of engaging the different minds, we see that trends of college freshmen dropping out of their first year experience. And the same, we know that primary and secondary high school students are really struggling to build stamina and interest in learning. Like there's a lot going on. And with the speed of information these days, things are coming faster at young minds and kind of that growing minds. How does the content that you choose excite learners, or how does your product solve an issue with keeping them engaged?
That is an enormous issue, and of course, it's been an enormous issue in the last couple of years when so much of learning has been online. And I see that with my own kids. I have two teenagers; they're 14 and 16, and it's not easy to keep them going, especially when classes were online. It was really easy to turn off your camera and not pay attention, and I think everybody saw that. And so it's hard to keep kids engaged remotely, older students, younger students, all of them. But there are ways to do it, and we really do think that Bloom's literature is helpful with that. One thing, as I mentioned before, I think one thing that Bloom's has that other databases don't is all that video content. And, as you know, Greg, we have this enormous films division in our company that runs films on demand, which is kind of the Netflix of educational video. And what that means for us at Bloom's is that we have access to all this video infrastructure. So we have the servers that can host video files. We have a great video player. We have rights people who are acquiring new films all the time, many of them in the literary field. And we have partnerships with places like HBO and PBS working to get us work with them to get their videos on our product. And I think it's really helpful to show to show a video or even just a clip of a video, like a great scene from a great literary work from a great play or whatever, to get the whole class watching that together and talking about that. I think that's really useful, and that's something Bloom's can really help you with. Also, another thing that Bloom's does is we offer a big bank of discussion questions and essay topics, and those are designed particularly to engage students, to get them talking and thinking. So none of this is easy, but we do think that Bloom's can be very helpful.
All amazing points, and I know that the discussion of using video in classrooms is not new, but it's definitely ramping up as we kind of move into this whole post-COVID era, where there's so much learning that you can't cram into a half an hour with kids, or an hour with your students. Also worth mentioning, and I love this part, in our Shakespeare Center, we have segments that are like, what does this play mean for today? You can actually look at the context and the relevance of things that were written so long ago, and kind of bring that value to today. So there's so many good parts of Bloom's.
Absolutely, like discussing, recent productions, recent movies. I think that is, a way to keep people engaged. And people, talking about how, I don't know, the '90s movie Clueless is based on a Jane Austen film. That's kind of useful, and it just shows how these great stories continue to be relevant today. And I think that's another way of engaging students.
Absolutely. I mean, as soon as you find where their interest is, you kind of find the hook to getting them where you want to go. And I think it's a great point. So we've talked about a few of the features in there. Any hidden gems that you personally like to talk about in Bloom's?
You hinted at it, Greg. You probably know it's my favorite, but the Shakespeare Center really is my favorite. It is popular, but I wish it were even more popular because I think it's terrific. But the idea of the Shakespeare Center is it's basically, it's kind of a database within a database. It's about all things Shakespeare. It covers in detail every single one of Shakespeare's plays, and all the poems as well. It's got lots of literary criticism. It's got videos. It's got essay topics. But its backbone is this multi-volume companion to Shakespeare that we published a few years ago. It was highly acclaimed, and I think it was really great. The point behind that that set was to give students the background they need to understand every play. So for every play, we offer a detailed synopsis and things like that, which is fairly standard. But we also do things like we offer discussions, like sections on the difficulties of the play. Those things in the play that are hardest for students to understand, they're most confusing for students and for first-time readers or watchers of the play, and we sort of give them the tools to understand that kind of stuff. And we also offer things like we discuss the key passages, the most important passages, the to be or not to be speech in Hamlet, but we also offer a section on difficult passages, those passages that are just hard to understand, and just giving students a few keys to get inside them, we find is really super helpful. We just think that once you get a basic foundation for Shakespeare, it really starts to open up. And I'll tell you, Greg, recently, this is just about my own personal curiosity journey, but I see a lot of plays in New York, and recently they were doing a production of Hamlet, and I really wanted to take my son, and it was sort of a hard sell. This is a 3.5-hour production of Hamlet, so it wasn't easy. 2 intermissions. But my son finally agreed. It might have been Father's Day when I asked him. And so on our way up to the show, we took the subway up, and I gave him all the background I could. Like I told him what was going to happen in the play. Gave him a really detailed synopsis of the play. And if you remember Hamlet, there's a lot going on in Hamlet.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I told him about some of the issues that Hamlet was going to struggle with, and some of the themes that he was going to talk about, and some of the weird characters in the play and things like that. And even during the play, I tried to, every once in a while, I would kind of whisper in his ear, like, that's Polonius hiding behind the curtain or something like that, just to make sure that he was on track, that he wasn't, totally lost. And there were 2 intermissions, as I said, so we discussed what was happening. And at the end, he said, that was pretty good. Maybe someday we'll see King Lear. King Lear's the only one he's actually read. You can imagine how happy I was. But like I say, I do think that giving kids some background, giving kids the tools, just giving them a little push is really all they need.
That's awesome. And it's so funny, even hearing you talk about, your love and depth of literature, and, you trying to just extend that into your own household, you bringing some of that experience that you're dealing with into the database itself, kind of understanding, you have your kids of your own. kind of understand that those minds kind of wander as they want to.
Not always easy, but I do think it's worth it.
So trends. I know that you are connected into the educational space in multiple markets. I know that you're always trying to figure out what the best way to bring information in or build tools around helping students or minds that are growing to understand that information. Are there any trends that stick out to you? Is there anything that's kind of on your radar that you'd like to talk about?
Well, there are a variety of trends in literary education these days. I think there's a push towards teaching more nonfiction and informational text, which I think is interesting, and we're trying to move to that in Bloom's, as much as we can. Another trend that is much more troubling to me is a recent trend to ban or challenge certain books in libraries. And I know librarians talk about that all the time, and people in the literary community talk about that all the time. And I think about that a lot too. Along at Facts on File back in the 90s, we started publishing a series called Banned Books, and we still publish that today. We still update those books and publish those as ebooks today. But this set covers all sorts of books that have been banned and challenged. Historical incidents like the banning of Galileo's works in the Renaissance, up to the present day when books like The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas have been challenged or removed from libraries in many cases, and a lot of other books like that as well. And it's something we think about a lot. It just seems more than ever there seems to be a fear that books can poison kids, that kids can't handle books. And I saw that recently, or we all saw that recently, when Art Spiegelman's graphic novel Maus, which is a graphic novel, very highly acclaimed classic graphic novel about the Holocaust, was recently removed from a school. And the stated reason was that there was sort of a half-dressed figure in one of the images in the book. But really, it seemed like it's just the content. They felt the content was just too disturbing for students. And I personally feel, as a father, that I think students can handle a lot more than we think they can, and in some ways they can handle even more than we can. And I hope that people come to trust students more.
I think that's super important, and I think that again, going back to the fact that you're so deeply rooted in literature, I imagine that as a parent, you would love to have those discussions with your kids. That would be something you would look forward to, discussing with them and kind of putting context around, or the whys or the whens. So. Good trend to be aware of. I mean, I definitely know that is something taking a lot of momentum right now. Jeff, this has been awesome. I mean, so we're going to kind of round it out. Is there anything else that you feel that we haven't touched on, or that you would like other people to know about yourself or the Bloom's Literature Database?
We talk a lot about lifelong learning at the company. I do think that really is important, and I think that's important with literature as well. Like, people don't think about that; they think of literature as something you got to get through in school. But really, literature can just be a really valuable part of yourself as you get older. As for myself, you probably don't know this, Greg, but I actually write short stories on the side, and I publish them occasionally. They're mostly like mystery and thriller short stories, so kind of the opposite of literature, but still like being involved just on the periphery of that world, I think gives me a different perspective on things, and it's something I really enjoy. And it adds an extra dimension, I think, to my own kind of journey, my own focus on literature.
That's awesome, and I think you also make a great point that education doesn't have to be limited to the classroom. You looked at a play that you could engage your son in kind of learning and enjoying at the same time. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll have a Jeff Soloway hosted short story challenge for students out there. Maybe we'll do something like that in the future.
We'll see. There are better people to hire, but sure, why not?
We'll have to clear that with some people above my pay grade. But
sure.
Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute joy to talk to you.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
And everybody, thank you for joining us today. And if you're interested in more of these Curiosity Found interviews, we'll be having more of these as we go forward. So please keep a lookout on our different sessions available from infobase.com. Jeff, have a fantastic day, and take care, everybody.
All right. So long.